All right. Well, thank you for tuning in. This video we're putting on. This is be just strictly on covering when you hear the term double cover. This is not a procedure that it's in Airtech's manual or probably any other manual that I know of as far as being a legal, system to use. We're going to show it in the Airtech system, but it's a process, and we'll kind of go through the fundamentals of it to explain what it is and why it was, came up with, and most time on experimentals. Sometime in the future, I may look into changing our STC to maybe include it if possible. I'll have to check the regulations and stuff on that, but it's done in many realms. I have built a Bear Hawk and a Skyboat that I double cover just to get that slick look, just looks neat. There's no tape lines or nothing. And, if someone's never been around it, they scratch their head and they're rubbing it, and it's just a neat process. So I'm just going to do this video to kind of explain the process of this. The other half of this was the one that we did on the tapes, and this is just a little demonstration piece. I figured we'll just do this other half and show the procedure of this. So it's my friend Don Adamson, and he'll explain some of the things that he's been doing lately that kind of ties in with this double cover method. Don?
Yep, Don Adamson on 92nd West Aviation. We've been covering airplanes, restoring airplanes for about 25 years. We started out using the Airtech system, and like everybody else, we've used them all on different airplanes, different customers. Recently, I purchased the Pitts Model 12 program from the Kimballs out of Florida, and along with it came this procedure that they had developed, double cover. And anyway, what it was designed to do was to, well, not designed, I guess I talked to Kevin, and there's a lot of history behind it where it first started out. It started out as a way to keep old fabric airworthy, and what they would do is they would plaster on another layer of cotton over top of cotton that didn't pass, and kind of like putting shingles on re-shingling a house without pulling the old shingles off. And later on, Jim Yonkin, he had come up with and started using it on some of his stagger wing Beechcraft that he was restoring, where he would convert like the D models to the G models, in which he'd put a 450 Pratt & Whitney on, and in the prop wash area, the tapes and the fabric would take a beating, and this was a way to stiffen up the fabric and to keep the tapes from lifting. And then later on, the Kimballs, when they started with their Model 12 and having a 360 horse radial up front, and now they're up to 450 horsepower, they needed a way to keep the tapes from coming off. And so what better way than to make the whole surface a tape? And that's basically what double covering is. And a couple of things you got to watch for. It's a pretty much the same procedure as putting on one tape, except we're doing the whole surface. And we have to put we have to cover the airplane or cover the surface the same as everything. We do one with an overlap, get our 1 inch, put our reinforcement down, rib stitch. Everything's the same, just like Robbie said. That was how they did it. And then on this side here, we'll do the same thing, except we're going to put one piece of lightweight fabric over it to tie it all in.
We'll just play like this has not been taped on the other side, and it's this way on both sides. Like I said, this is not even an airworthy piece. We'll probably just take this out to the edge and trim it off for time purposes. But yeah, it would be looking like this on both sides and stitched up to the point of we're fixing to put down tapes. That's when this process would be taken over. And like I mentioned before, don't go and do this to your Cub, because it's not really it'll work, but what I'm saying, it's not part of the legal process of covering an airplane. Most of the time you see this on a experimental or something of that nature.
Yeah, or high performance or high speed. The other benefit of double cover is you'll get this nice flat looking piece without any seams. Now there is still going to be a seam at the overlap, and of course you try to tend to put your seams on the bottom so you don't see it, and then when the person walks up to the airplane, all they see is a flat piece of control surface or wing or fuselage. And
their first reaction is you've basically put so much paint that you give it the dip look that they can't. They'll say, well, you've hid all the tapes with deep paint where you didn't. There is no tape line, so it just gives it that look without having all of that weight or penalty of a paint, that could crack when it, gets too thick like that.
Yeah, it's called burying your tapes with paint and fabric. And also, this doesn't add that much weight. There's been some tests done, and the lightweight fabric, it would be the same as on here, just we have added fabric to this piece. But the lightweight fabric has a tighter weave, and the theory is it takes less paint to fill it up. So in the long run, you're winding up with less paint. And paint is weight. Every time you make a pass with that gun, you've added weight. So if you can make less passes with the paint gun, then you'll save weight. Not saying it's going to be lighter than traditional covering, but it's not going to add that much weight if you do it right and don't add too much paint.
Yeah, the part I'm kind of I say specialized in. I'm kind of pretty deep into the Super Cub world, and it's the biggest, latest thing, greatest thing now is weight. And weight is something you have to start from the very beginning. If you're building a kit, you have to use thin washers where possible. If you're going to try to make a light cub, you don't decide on the day you're going to order the seat cushions to try to order light seat cushions. You got seat cushions. You got to start from the beginning. And I do a lot of testing since I bought Airtech, just to answer people with an honest answer. I do a lot of square foot measurements on the 1/10 of the gram scale. Got everything from Airtech to the old Razorback to everything I've tested back there. And it's really physics. I can take Airtech and put it on at a minimum, make a really nice shiny paint job, and be in the lowest category of most of your covering weights. I can turn it right around and put a bigger nozzle, put an extra couple coats. I can make it be at the high end. So Star Gloss, Stitz, Superfly, they're all, it's just physics. How many coats are you going to put on? There's another 7 to 8, 9 pounds probably on a cub every time you put a coat of paint. So, this system, like he mentioned, it does add a little weight, but it's not like what you would think, because it has other little factors that come into play. Me and Don was talking earlier, talking about some of the early pits that had problems with the tapes coming loose, maybe with some earlier fabric systems. And they had some ribs that was almost within a foot of each other, and they went all the way up to a 4-inch wide tape. Well, if they're doing 2 4-inch wide tapes, there ain't but about 4 or 5 inches left of the open part, so why not just, that's why they decided to go ahead and start doing a double cover.
Well, you ready to start?
Yep, we'll go ahead and stop the video and get our glue laid out. All right, at this point, what we've got is a UA55 thin to about like what we normally call the thin is the 3-to-1, and 3 parts thinner and 1 part UA55. And Don's got a 3-inch roller, and this is a very similar situation if you was using sticks with a poly brush. One of the things I've noticed with Airtech, what we're doing is putting the glue on, and I think he'll tell about it in a minute. The Kimballs would use the poly tack, so we're kind of going along that same line. Is when you're putting on the Stitz poly brush and the pink. It seems like the pink usually will stay a little longer and not flash off as quick, and it gives you time to put it all on this way. Now let's run out all the rows and let's even everything down. Airtech will try to dry maybe just a little faster, and because of the reducers in it, it's going to get pretty stout pretty fast, with a large area. So I'll go ahead and let him take over and start telling about what he's doing.
So what we've done, we can put this on with the brush, but what we found is that a roller does a whole lot better and faster job. Get a nice round, get it all the way around on here, and then just go to town. And we're gonna put one layer out all the way around, glue it on, and it will level itself out and kind of do the little ZW pattern here.
Because you got to take an effect, it's 3 parts reducer. A lot of this is going to reduce up, so he's taking out all the little high spots as he goes.
Yeah, whereas with the brush, we'd be leaving brush marks, or could be leaving brush marks.
And he'd still be in that first bay, probably.
Yeah, we'd still be over here brushing.
But that's kind of the same process I do when I do one in Stitz. Once I get it all covered, then I got all these little thick spots. Then I come back and take all them down and just evens it down. That way you don't, because when all the reducer comes out of it, it could be a little slightly higher spot with some glue, which, like I mentioned in one of my early videos, what the glue's doing is going in the fabric and holding on the fabric. So you don't want to come in here with some thicker glue and rolling it right on the top. You're not going to get that hold to it.
Yeah, you want the glue thin because you want it to soak down in there. We're going to want to put 2 coats of this stuff, so we're going to let this flash off. We did this little test piece here, and it's starting to flash. The shine has gone away. We've got a little bit of dull, and we're going to go probably about 10 minutes past it all looking like that. And then we'll put another layer on. We don't want to put it on wet because all it's going to do is just lift itself back up, and you know, and I've done it too wet, and it can get hairy and sticky, and yeah.
And I don't want, like I mentioned when I was doing the stitching thing with Brian, if there's something I see, we don't use cue cards. We're just doing this off the cuff. A humid day is not a time to be doing this because you'll get that typical white foggy look to it, and it'll roll back up on your brush, and the humidity, the cooling effect of this evaporating out, it just make a mess. So you don't want to do this process on a warm, humid day.
All right, well, we've got our first coat on, and it's soaked in, it's dried, and we're going to put a total of 4 coats of this thinned 3-to-1 glue in. And the reason we're doing that, it's a little deviation, but we're trying to get glue in to the fabric because we need to put another layer of fabric on it, and we want our glue between the fabric and not on top of our final fabric. So we'll put 4 of these the 3-to-1 thin glue, and we use the thin so it gives us a little bit of time to dry out. So as we're not rolling, as it's not being dry, and anyway, it gives us a chance to work it and work a large area.
And after it dries, it seems, but when it was wet, you're looking at it, you're thinking, oh my, there's some lines, but it comes out nice and smooth. And like I mentioned in the first video, that's the glue, the RA4000 is evaporated out, so it's just the glue left. So we're just using the 4000 as a carrier for our glue. Like he mentioned, we're going to do 4 passes, and really that's only 1 coat off from the system. The reason I say that is, if you'll notice in the book, putting a piece of tape on, you're supposed to put a thin, let it dry for 5 minutes, put another thin, let it dry, then put a thin and put your tape in that. Well, we can't put a thin and put our cover in that, so we're going to go ahead and put that one down and let it dry. He's just going to add 1 more just to, we could add a thick in amongst there, but like he said, it's not going to go on as well. Just, it goes on real fast. Going to go ahead and go with 4 of them. That way, when you put this fabric in, we're going to carry glue through that too, we'll explain, but we ensure we have enough glue under here to take care of that. So we're going to go ahead in this time and get all the other coats on before we come back.
All right, so now we've got our 4 layers of glue on. We've rolled it, it's kind of tacked off. You can touch it, and anyway, we don't want it sticky, because when we lay out this fabric, we don't want the fabric to be grabbing areas, picking up glue and moving it, because then we wind up with too much glue in one area, not enough in the other, and possibly a line that'll come up and show its way all the way through the fabric. So we do want it to not be sticky. Now we'll lay the fabric on here, and then we'll go through and grab a brush, and we'll brush down over anything that's high. So it could be like the top of a rib, spar, edges, and we want to glue down all the edges, and then we'll come back later after they've dried, and then we'll shrink between the areas to kind of let the fabric suck down. But we don't want to shrink without gluing down here, because otherwise it'll bridge up, and then it'll bridge across the middle, and then we'll have a hard time getting the fabric to stick to the lower fabric.
This is a piece of lightweight, and lo and behold, I didn't have any smooth back there. It's what we consider the uncertified. So this is going to be a worst case scenario. It was the last of a row, got a lot of creases, but it will still work out. But this is going to be kind of a worst case scenario, but we're just going to show how it will still work out.
We've got it laid.
And this time he's just going to use a brush. We can just control a little bit better what he's doing.
Mm-hmm. So what we do is we'll just kind of start in the middle. We don't want to, we want to try to keep as much of these lines out as possible.
This is really wrinkles. Not a good situation, but they will go down.
But you'll see that it's the glue is going through the fabric, and it's sucking it down to the tape line, and it's staying down. And we don't want to move too fast on it, because we don't want this to jump up on the other side. So we'll kind of go.
If I'm coming over here, if I'm pulling on it, give it time to tack,
Right, we want to give it time to glue down and stay down before we start moving someplace else. Yeah,
this is gonna be some rough fabric, but it'll work. At this point, he'll go ahead and we'll stop the video. We'll go around all the perimeters and we'll get everything held down around these square parts.
We got it glued down, all the high spots, and we're just kind of waiting for it to dry before we put the iron on it and smooth things out. But we're going to take this time and go ahead and put some glue where we're going to cut it. And what that does, that makes it so you can cut a nice, sharp, crisp edge. And so we'll get our glue here, and we know our line's going to be about 1 inch off the side, so I'm just going to run some glue right in through here, and we'll let it dry, and then we're going to get the pencil out and do us a nice little edge on there, or a nice little line to follow.
At this point, we'll stop the video. He'll go all the way around and be setting all this fabric so it'll make a clean cut, and we'll come back while we're waiting on all this to dry.
All right, well, we got our tape, one large tape, glued down. We've glued it over all the high spots around the edges. Now we've got to work all these wrinkles out. Normally we wouldn't have these wrinkles with a new piece of material, but this is what we had, and so we're going to make it work. We've got the iron set. The lowest it goes down to is about 200 degrees. That's what we're going to try it out, and what we're going to try to take all these little wrinkles out and smooth it out between the out in the field here. So,
if you get your iron a little bit too hot, you're always afraid that it may activate and stick it down in the center, which wouldn't be the end of the world, but you may not have your fabric set, and a little bit of tightness set on it like you want.
Right, so this is working pretty good. It's taking the wrinkles out, and we're not gluing it in the middle because we're not ready to glue it yet. We want to glue that with glue and not with heat activated glue.
This piece of fabric was in such bad shape because it was just the last little piece on a part of the road, and it's taking them on out, and it's just a fine line between having it too hot or making it stick, or being able to shrink them out. And once it gets these shrunk out, the outside edges will be just like the standard putting your first fabric on the side. You're going to wrap them around. You can activate that with a gun, put some glue through it, or you can come under here and wet it, like you was doing the normal, putting the fabric around just to get this all, sealed down all the way around the sides.
Yeah, and we probably should have glued the sides down first just to make sure that they're sealed and not going to get pulled in, but at 200, we're not shrinking very much. It's just enough to take wrinkles out.
At this point, we'll stop the video and we'll go around here and try to shrink. All right. At this point, we went across here with a glue, with a iron at about I think I had mine set at about 250. And this was probably a pretty challenging piece because of all them wrinkles, but I guess that's kind of good in a way to show that they can't all be taken out, and we just lightly hovered it across it and just do enough shrinking and not try to stick it to it. We went on ahead and stuck all the edges down, and he's going to mention over here what went on with this. We did a little test thing before we started the video. We're probably up to about a 6-to-1 on this, so it's almost, you hear a lot of people just taking a rag and thinner and doing it. That would probably work, but we just like to carry a little glue with it, so we're probably up to about a 6-to-1. He'll mention over here.
Yeah, 6-to-1 is what we're wicking through, and what we're trying to do is to activate the glue that's underneath. Now we had a little ridge line right here. When we were rolling it on, we got a little too thick and it left us a little ridge. You can feel it with your fingers. By the time we get some paint and some primer, it's probably going to go away. If it really bothered us, we might be able to take an iron and work on it a little bit, smooth it out. But right now we're going to glue everything down. One thing too is you can't put your base glue on and then walk away for a week. You need to do it while it's still, you want it dry, but you still want it green. And otherwise it's not going to activate the way we want and suck up into this top fabric and glue the two fabrics together. So
when he mentioned a while ago on this little ridge, that goes along. I think on one of the videos before I talked about if you missed a drip under the bottom, rather than cutting it off or doing something, you can take the tip of that small iron and just kind of just heat it and just match it out flat. That's where I would probably take the very tip of that iron and set it at about 250, 275 and just work that little ridge. And all you're doing is just you're just kind of melting that little ridge down a little bit to flatten it out where you probably can't see it. Because there's a lot of little places when you're completely done that you might have a little bubble that you'll take an iron and just kind of work down. And it's just a verge off of being straight thinner. I mean, I stuck my finger in it a while ago and let it almost dry, and you can have a little sticky to it. So it has a little bit of a glue characteristic in it, but it's really thinned down a long way.
Yeah, and all we're trying to do is just to wick it down through there and activate the glue underneath.
And this would be basically like this would be the pass that you would be using if you was putting the tapes down and just laid your tape into the wet glue. This would be the pass where you would be wetting in your tape. We're wetting in this, what we call the large tape, because that's all it is, just one large tape doing the job of what we do with the small tapes. So at this point, we'll go ahead and just roll everything on out here. All right, at this point, we went across this, or he did with one pass of that 6-to-1. And after looking at it, if you look at the many passes that we do with putting normal tapes on, there would be one more go on, but we've kind of agreed that I think this would be our stopping point because it has a grip to it. And if it was a situation where you were just using 4,000 to activate it through, that would work, but then you'd want to take a little bit of glue through. But by doing it with that 6-to-1, I think we've got enough glue and activated enough to hold our fabric. I think that this is going to be where we need to be, because you can kind of scratch on it and kind of feel the weave, but it has that gray look. At this point, you go through and look at all your fine lines and little imperfections, take your iron, maybe work one down. We had a little spot right here that just looked like it might have been one of the old ridges of glue like he was talking about. So we just kind of experimented with just pure 4,000. And he had one over there we hadn't fooled with, but we just kind of just held a little bit of liquid on it, a little bit of reducer, and we wasn't really taking any glue away, but it held it on there long enough that it reactivated the glue and kind of relaxed it down. You wouldn't want to do a lot of that, or it would, you start washing out all your glue out of your fabric. So,
But other than that, we're going to go through and, like I said, clean it up. We'll look at all the little corners and just perfect our fabric, make it perfect looking, and then we're ready for primer and paint. It shouldn't take a whole lot of primer and paint, just enough primer to make the paint stick to it, and enough paint to make it sweat.
if you was using the Airtech primer at this point, I would go with, I would think one cross coat. That would be one this away and one this away. Let it cure for a few days, sand it out, get a good even sand on it, and maybe one more thin coat and go right in with your color. Because like you mentioned in the beginning, you're not going to have a soakage that you're having to deal with or build up. And Airtech primer has a real good building quality. If you're using the poly spray or one of the others, it's the same situation right now. It has that same feel like if you put the poly brush or whatever on. At this point right here, it has that same feel, so you're not feeling no more weave. It's already glued right up to the surface, so you just go right on with your primer at this point.